Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem, B'Shem Irreligious Torah. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yaakov Shlita on Isser of Fnei Iver B'Mokem Mitzvah. Mitzvos that cause Aveiros. The Advocate Schus is sponsoring a shir called Irreligious Torah 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
We often say when you're young, the nisayon in life is, will you do the right thing? When you get older, you're often faced with the challenge, what's the right thing? You don't even know what the right thing is. You want to do the right thing. Today's shir is basically a group of such questions. Someone asked me this question. He was walking here in Brooklyn on Shabbos and a driver pulled up and said, Slicha, he needed directions. Imagine a Yiddish driver ask you for directions on Shabbos. Should you help him? Should you tell him where to go? If he'll get lost, so he'll drive more. Is that your business? Is that your cheshbon? We had a shayla about a Mohel that was asked to make a milah, and he went to the house to see the baby before, and he realized that this is a house of Chilul Shabbos. They don't keep anything, and on the Shabbos bris, they probably will drive the baby to shul by car, and malachas, they might even have music by the bris. You're talking about a family of Chilul Shabbos. The bris would be full of Chilul Shabbos. Should he make the milah? Someone found an Aveda. He found a lost item. He knows, perhaps he even knows who the owner is. It has a name in it, but it's something that the owner should not be owning. It's something, an issa, a pritzis, or something of that sort. Should he return the Aveda, but you're causing the owner to be reunited with the Aveda? That's a chafta d'isura. So the Emma says, you see, this is a group of questions, I guess, lefnei v'moka mitzvah. In other words, I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm making the milah, but it's causing Chilul Shabbos. I'm giving directions to help him out, but he's going to be driving because of my directions. I'm returning an Aveda, avoy l'yid I am, but he's doing an issa with that item. So at first glance, we know the right approach is the ends don't justify the means. You can't do a mitzvah that brings an aveira. Or better, or worse yet, perhaps, mitzvah b'aveira ain't a mitzvah. It's not the fact you did a mitzvah and aveira. No, mitzvah b'aveira ain't a mitzvah. But in this situation, it's worse because lamaisa, it's not you did a mitzvah and he did an aveira. You did a mitzvah and he did an aveira. Now you have an aveira. And that's lifnei iva. You caused him to do the chet. So here the question is, that maybe that will tell you don't do the mitzvah. But the Amos says lifnei iva is a very challenging concept. Now I'll just show you how, quote unquote, a person can have a bargain regarding lifnei iva. Imagine you give someone food to eat and he won't make a bracha. So obviously with eating without a bracha is an issa d'Rabbanan. But says the Minchas Chinuch in Reish Lamed Beis, and again in Reish Lamed Ches, he has an issa d'Rabbanan because he eats without a bracha. But you have an issa d'Raisa of lefnei iva because you caused him to do an issa. Now how could it be? He only has a d'Rabbanan, I have a d'Raisa. So the Minchas Chinuch, it's pashit. Because just like if you give an eight to she'eina haigenes, there's an issa d'Raisa of lefnei iva. No, the worst eight to she'eina haigenes is causing a chet, even if it's the Rabbanan. So here we see, according to Minchas Chinuch and others, causing someone to do an issa d'Rabbanan, the person that caused the issa has a d'Raisa. So now we expanded our agenda. Not only is lefnei iva shaykh by an issa d'Rabbanan, by issa d'Raisa, but even by an issa d'Rabbanan. So now we really have to reconsider every shayla. Where do we go? So the emes is, there are probably close to 30 sources in Shas, Mishnayos and Shas, of lifnei iva. There's Mishnayos about Shviyas, and all over about lifnei iva. But I think, b'derech klal, all of them are simple cases. L'mashal, the Gemara in Psachim Chaveis, don't give wine to a Nazir, or in the Dharm Daf Samach Beis, don't give Avodah Zarah to a guy. In Masechta Shabbos, right in the beginning, don't cause Chilul Shabbos. All those cases are simple. You're giving him an Aveira, and there's no mitzvah for you. There's no mitzvah to give a wine to a Nazir. That's a simple lifnei iva. Our group of questions are a little more complicated, because I'm giving him an Aveira, but I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm returning an Aveda. So maybe that justifies lifnei iva. I'm trying to help him minimize Chilul Shabbos. I'm giving him directions. But then again, the ends don't justify the means. So what came to mind is a very beautiful Rabbi Chanan in Kavod Simon Ayin. Rabbi Chanan says that Ben Adam Chaveira is unique. Many Ben Adam Chaveiros are dependent on kavana. For example, there's an issa of Lashon Hara, but l'tay LS is mutter. There's an issa of sinna, but if you hate a rasha, it's a mitzvah. There's an issa of hitting, but to hit a child for chinuch purposes is mutter. So Ben Adam Chaveira, the isurim depend on kavana. So I was thinking maybe we should add another issa to that list. Maybe lifnei iva depends on kavana. If you're doing it for a mitzvah, maybe it's mutter. But there's an obvious chiluk, because lifnei iva is not a bein adam chaveira only. It's bein adam lamokim. Rabbi Chanan was talking about adam chaveira. This is bein adam lamokim. So what comes to mind is one of the examples of lifnei iva found in Bav Metzia Ayin Hayamid Beis. The Gemara says if someone lends money to someone else without eidim or a star, with no proof, so the malva is oiva on lifnei iva, because the loiva will either forget or deny the whole thing. So you're oiva lifnei iva, you're causing the loiva to deny a chayv that he has. And agav, people say, yeah, but I'm a Talmid Chacham. This wouldn't happen to me. The Gemara says Talmid Chacham has more of a problem, because he's busy learning, he forgets the chayv. And the emphasis, this is even more common by small amounts of money. A person borrows a simcha in yeshiva, I need $1 to buy a soda. What are the chances you're going to ever repay it? So the malva is oiva lifnei iva. The kasha is, why is it lifnei iva? The malva is doing a mitzvah deraisa of him kesev tal v'sami. So why lifnei iva? Is that a raya that there's no lifnei iva maka mitzvah? Avada not. Because the emphasis is very pashit. Do the mitzvah and do it right. Lend the money and give a star or an IOU. So avada, it's a mitzvah, but you're doing the mitzvah improperly. So that's not a raya. What comes to mind, which is probably a better raya, is a big sugi of Naiv. We once discussed this. Based on a Gemara in Chulav Kuv Zayin and Beis, the Gemara says you can't give someone to eat if he won't, bread that is, if he won't wash, because you're oiva lifnei iva. He's eating without washing. And this Gepaskin in Arachayim Kuf Samach Tesiv Beis, incidentally, even though until times only be the Rabbanon, the one that enables the person to eat without bread, without washing, is even on the Raisa. Comes again Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina is in the end of the 8th parak in Brachis, and he says, of course you can't give someone bread to eat if he won't wash. But if you're giving tzedaka, if you're doing a mitzvah, you're allowed to give him bread even though he doesn't wash. Ooh. Maybe it is a raya to what we're looking for. That even though lifnei iva applies, but if you're doing a mitzvah, there's no lifnei iva. However, this is not so muskim. The Beis Yosef in Kuf Samach Tes quotes this Rabbeinu Yoina, and he says, "Ve'ein dvar of nirim." What are you talking about? Even though it's a mitzvah, there's still lifnei iva. So our question is the machlokes Rabbeinu Yoina and Beis Yosef. Is the lifnei iva maka mitzvah? How do we paskin? So the Mechaben Kuf Samach Tes Si Beis says, don't give him to eat unless he he's talking about making a bracha. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention. This is talking about making a bracha. If he doesn't make a bracha, or eat without washing. Both are the same. So the Mechaber says, don't give him to eat unless he makes a bracha. And the Ramah says, b'makei mitzvah, you're allowed to give him to eat even though he won't make a bracha. For tzedaka purposes, it's a mutter. So now we see, giving someone to eat who won't wash or make a bracha is a machlokes Rabbeinu Yoina and with Beis Yosef and Mechaber Ramah. So here we found a beautiful makor. But that's not accurate. Because you look at the Taz, Magen Avram, and Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah and Yud quoting Taz and Magen Avram. Even the Ramah that's Mekel is only by a suffix. You give someone to eat. Will you make a bracha or not? You have no idea. I mean, he doesn't look very Hamish, but maybe he'll make a bracha, maybe he won't. He's marginally from. But some people, even in that level of from, make a bracha. So even Ramaz Mekel only b'makom safik. So rely on, I like the way the Levush explains, if you're doing a mitzvah and it's only a safik, nothing's going to happen to you. Just do it. But says the Mishnah, if it's a vadai won't make a bracha, all agree you cannot give him to eat if he'll make no bracha or won't wash his hands. So now we see fakert, now we see a raya that lifnei iva does apply even b'makom mitzvah. One more raya, and that's important, pasha lacha ma'isa as well. In Moed Katan Daf Yud Zayin, the Gemara tells a story about Amsa the Rebbe, a very prestigious woman, as you know, other stories in Shas about her. She once saw someone hitting his son, Maka B'nai HaGadol, and she said, you should be put into Chayrim. Because if Ne'iva lo yisiten michsho, b'Maka B'nai Gadol HaKosim Medaber. You should be put into Chayrim, because you or Oivan if Ne'iva lo yisiten michsho. And this will soon see Gepaskin Yeradei Reish Mem Siv Chas, hitting an older son is lifnei iva. There's a mitzvah to hit a child. And I should remind you, in Makis Daf Chesam Aleph, the Gemara says, even if the child is good, you're supposed to hit him. Very strange. If he's good, so Rav Dessler in Chayla Gimel, page 360, quotes the Gra, that part of chinuch is teaching achna. You got to put a child in his place. I'm afraid to say this too loudly, but he says, even if the child's good, you have to hit him. So here we see that it's a mitzvah to hit a child, and yet the Gemara says that you hit the child, it's lifnei iva. This is the right what we're looking for. That even though you're doing a mitzvah, there's lifnei iva. But then again, we could wonder, who said the Gemara in Moed Katan was talking that he's hitting him for chinuch purposes? Maybe the child did something careless, and the father's a balkas and hits him for mil da'alma. And the embassies, the Ritvav in Kedushin Daf Lamed Beis is almost mefurish. And the Chikik Leiv in Simon Yotes says it mefurish, that hitting a child that's lifnei iva is only when the child is doing mil da'alma. But if it's in a chinuch context, there's no lifnei iva. So we have a raya that b'makom mitzvah there's no lifnei iva. However, if you look in the Iyun Yaakov on this Gemara, he has a kasha. The Gemara says, Maka b'noi hagodol. And how about hitting a girl? There's no lifnei iva? So Yaakov, of course, who didn't bitoi. But why does a person typically hit his son? Because he's not learning. So you hit him. So it's more shchiach to hit a boy than a girl, because girls didn't learn Torah in those days. But we see that when you hit a child for learning purposes, for chinuch purposes, there is lifnei iva. And the Steichemer in Chelik Beis, in the Standard Prince, page 311, says, Stimas ha-poiskim are like this Iyun Yaakov, the like a ritva. And the emphasis, you look in Shulchan Aruch, you're there, Reish Mem Siv Chav, Hamaka b'nai Gadol, he's put into Chayim, he's Ayuf Neiva. It doesn't say, but chinuch purposes is mutter. So now we see from this Gemara that even though you're doing a mitzvah, but if it brings an Aveira, that's lifnei iva. So now we have two rayas from giving to eat without a bracha and hitting a child. Lifnei iva applies b'makom mitzvah. But l'chayr we see more than this. Let me ask you a theoretical, which is not so theoretical after all. Let's say a person in a weak moment does the worst lifnei iva possible. He takes wine and gives it to a nazir. That's the Gemara. That's clear-cut lifnei iva. No, but all of a sudden an unexpected wind comes. And as he's about to drink the wine, it blows the wine out of the Nazir's hand, and it spills on the floor. Okay, so the Nazir was saved. Yad Hashem. The one that gave wine to the Nazir, was he oiv on lifnei iva? Zok the Yad Malachi in Siman Shin Samach Zayin. It's a Beferish Pasuk and at least two Gemaras. Which Beferish Pasuk? That's pretty easy. Lifnei iva lo yisiten michshel. It doesn't say don't cause man avera mamish. Don't give a ma'isa michshel. So even if the avera didn't materialize, you're oiva. But then he says, I have two Gemaras also. But listen to his brilliance. The Gemara says if you lend money without eidim, it's lifnei iva. Nothing happened yet. Maybe he'll pay back in the future. Maka b'nai hagadol. As soon as she saw him hitting a child, she put him in chayrim. Wait to see if the son responds. So Zok the Yad Malachi, from here is mashma, even if the child didn't end up hitting the father. If you give a chefta v'maisa michshel, you're over. And the Steichemer in Chelik Beis, page 294, agrees with this. And the Hezbollah Pashut. This is at least an Eitz She'eino Hygenes. You're putting a person in a situation that he might respond. Now the emissaries, some argue on this, but the point that I want to bring out is, if you're giving someone a Maisa Michshel, that's the Issa. So doesn't it make sense that when you, even a Makkah Mitzvah, but you're giving him a Maisa Michshel? But before we apply this more specifically, I'd like to ask you one question that I think introduces us to the most important yesod for today. Let's say it's a nice summer Shabbos afternoon. Now we have a next door neighbor, a Friar Yid, and he's Mechal Shabbos. And this Shabbos he's smoking in the backyard, and it's bothering you the Chilul Shabbos. You'd love to help him, but you don't know what to do. And you have a brainstorm. You say, "Excuse me, sir, you should know, the smoke, I'm very sensitive to smoke, it's not good for my lungs. Would you mind extinguishing your cigarette?" He says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know it bothers you. You know, he doesn't care about Shabbos, but he's a gentleman. Oh, I'm sorry." And right in front of your face, he extinguishes the cigarette. Then you have, "Oi, what did I do? I just made Lifnei Iva. I told the Yid on Shabbos to put out a cigarette. That's kibui. It's only the Rabbanan. We proved that even by the Rabbanan there's Lifnei Iva." Is that true? Doesn't sound right. But why not? He wasn't going to put out the cigarette. He was going to puff it until it's over. The teretz is l'char very pashut. The issa is enabling someone to do a chet. Here I'm limiting the chet. No, better yet, the issa is giving a michshel. Here I'm a matzel. If people continue to smoke, so every puff is another havara deraisa. Now he has one kibbud rabbanan, it's all over. The issa is nesinas michshel. This is asaras michshel. In other words, if you give a wine to the nazir and the wine spills out, I can understand it's asa, because that's a michshel, a pure michshel. Here, it's a pure matzel. Who says this? Maybe it's my own mashal, but the Yesod states from Rabbi Akiva Eiger. But listen to a brilliant Rabbi Akiva Eiger. In Yeridei Kuf Pei Aleph, the halachas of makif and of cutting someone's payas with a razor or which is also, of course, al pitoira. And basically, the halacha is if someone cuts someone's beard or payas with a razor, the makif is over on a lav, and the one that gets the shave is over on a lav as well. Makif and nikif. If someone takes a razor and cuts off his own payas or beard with a razor, he's over on makif and nikif. So the Shulchan Aruch in Sivav has a shaila: is an isha that cuts off a man's beard or payas, is she over on makif? Because she cut off her own payas, so maybe there's no issa makif on an isha. Rabbi Akiva Eiger, who cares? Even if there's no issa makif, but if she does it to a man, it's a fneiva. So it's zichar deraisa fneiva. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger, no. Maybe there's no fneiva. Because if she doesn't do it, he'll do it himself. That's what he says. You want to do it? If not, I'll do it myself. So this Chashiv Rebbetzin makes a pashta cheshbon. If he does it himself, he's over on two isurim, makif and nikif. If she does it, so there's no makif, only nikif. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger, in that case, she's reducing the issa, not making a michshel. So our cigarette is really Rabbi Akiva Eiger. If your kavod is to reduce the Aveiros, it's not a sinas michshel. I'll give you another dugma. The Tfer Shmuel on the Rosh in Bav Metzia Perikei, you've cut in Gimel. There's a Simen Beis on the Rosh. It says, of course, to lend money with ribbis, besides the issa of ribbis, is the fneiva. Let's say you see someone about to do ribbis deraisa, and you quickly cut a deal with him. You know what? I'll give you ribbis at a better price. But your ribbis is the rabbanan, and you're doing it to minimize the issa. There's no lifnei. Same cheshbon. A third mikar, the machzah shekel in Arachayim Siman Kuf Samach Gimel. Mamish, our case of earlier, to give someone to eat bread without they won't wash is lifnei. But if you take the bread and say, "Listen, Rabbi, let me feed you, make it easy for you," and you put it into his mouth, there's no lifnei. Because if he picks up the bread and eats it, he's even a rabbanan. If you feed it into his mouth, he didn't touch it. There's no real chiyuv, just because Chazal said don't differentiate. So by putting it into his mouth, you're not making an issa, You're reducing the issa. And the fourth makar, and this is a big sugya, but the Mincha Shleim, Shleim Zalman, and Simon Lamed Hay has this very painful question. If you have a guest or a worker, a Friday worker that's working in your house for 4 hours on a hot summer day, and he says, excuse me, can I have a cup of water? And you say, no, because you're not going to make a bracha. So what's going to happen? He's going to have sinas hadas. He's going to hate from a yidden. They don't give me a cup. I didn't ask for soda. He didn't give me water. So Shlomo Zalman says, but l'maisa, it's the fneiva. So Shlomo Zalman says, if you're giving him the water to reduce the sinner, you're not making a michshol, you're minimizing the michshol. Same yisoid. Now, although we know the klal is ein oim lad mechatei b'shvil sheyiske chavercha, so where to gebeten to make these cheshbainis, the teretz is, you're right, I can't do an aveira to help him. I can't take bread out of the oven on Shabbos to minimize his chilul Shabbos. But here, after the cheshbon is made, it's not a ma'isa michshol, it's not an issa. I'm not doing an aveira. And this I saw beferish the Har Tzvi and Simon Kuf Chafei has a similar shaila, and he says here it's not chatei, because at the end of the day he is not causing michshol, he's minimizing. He's not nesinas michshol, he's asaras michshol. He's not enabling, he's decreasing. So this Rabbi say is the yisoid that now we could go lahalacha lamaisa. Lifnei is a very serious issa, no doubt about it. To cause someone to do an issa d'Rabbanan, the machshol is even adaraisa lifnei, like we said. And even if you're kavod Hashem mitzvah, to do a mitzvah, you're doing a mitzvah, he's doing an aveira, lifnei. The one exception is if you end up with less michshol, your kavod is to minimize the michshol, then we have a heta, and let's apply it lamais. We'll start with this. We'll go organizing mikala lakaved. Simple shaila. You have a irreligious neighbor, relative, co-worker, comes Purim, and you want to be makarvim and mar b'chi b'vareyis, you'll send him shalach manis. Not a good idea, because the food that you send him, he will eat without a bracha. That's the Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Samach Tes. We learned that you can't give something to eat that won't make a bracha. I am doing a mitzvah d'Rabbanan of Mishloach Manos, so that doesn't justify l'fnei. Also, you could do the mitzvah in a different way. Send him a inspiring book on his level, or inspiring CD, something that will be makarvim. Now, I'm not saying you're yotzim Mishloach Manos. Some hold yes, some hold not, if it's not food. But you can't do a mitzvah that's going to bring an aveira. Question. You were asked information about a shidduch, a job, bekitza, you assess the situation, and you realize this is a real lashon hara l'te'elis. It's taka lashon hara, but it's te'elis, a clear-cut te'elis. But you know that when you're going to tell the person that asks you, him, not a good idea, stay away, he doesn't watch his mouth, and it's going to get back to the other party that you said bad about them. So you're doing lashon hara l'te'elis, perfectly mutter, but it's going to come out a rechilas problem, because the inquirer is going to say, oh yeah, even he told me you're no good. So the Chavetz Chaim in two places, in rechilas tes sifkat neim ber ma'im chayim, and rechilas tes yud bey says, don't give the information. You're doing a very nice thing of lashon hara l'te'elis, but you're causing inevitably rechilas. Now this is mamash how you said. The ends don't justify the means. You're doing a mitzvah, te'elas, but you're causing rechilas. And that would be, like we said, a mitzvah doesn't justify lifnei. Another halacha which Kedai to mention, people daven Shmoneh Esrei, a long Shmoneh Esrei, which is very nice and all, but they daven by a door or any place that people walk by when they finish davening, especially by Ma'ariv, and his long Shmoneh Esrei causes people to be over the halacha and Shulchan Aruch in Simon Kuf Beis, and based on a Gemara in Brachas Lamed Aleph, of walking in front of someone that davens. And as early as the Shiboli Halek of one of the Rishonim, Simon Chafei, Kamat says beferish, if you daven a long Shmoneh Esrei and you're davening a place that people walk by you, the long Shmoneh Esrei is a lifnei. Why? Pashit. Is the mitzvah to daven? Of course, daven in a place that's away from everybody else. Daven in the front, on the side. I mean, sometimes you come to a chasana and someone's davening a long mincha Shmoneh Esrei or ma'ariv, and the chasan's waiting with the parents and the two candles to go down to the chuppah, and he davens a long Shmoneh Esrei. So that's a real lifnei. People are going to walk right by him. So there it's a mitzvah, but the mitzvah can be done otherwise. Question. You find an item that the owner should not be owning. Now, I have to be very clear. I'm not talking about a kanoi that doesn't like this shita, so whatever the other shita has is treif. I'm talking about you find a book, a phone, a magazine that's treif, l'chol hadeis, okay? Or better yet, you find a ham sandwich, tarfis, that says in it Yossi, and he writes his phone number. A clear-cut magazine, beggar that's pretzas, not that's subjective. It's totally awesome. Should you return it to the bailam because the mitzvah Shabbos Aveda and keep it as a geneva like such lasalim, or is that lifneiva because he's going to use it? So this sounds like a lifneiva, and we have this question in camp where many more things are awesome. Cigarettes and firecrackers, and you find someone else's, and should you return it? He shouldn't be having it. So Rabbi Yashiv is quoted in the Sefer Shabbos Vedical Chasa Amad Kuf Yotes that if indeed it's a cheftzah de isura, not a subjective shita thing, but it's vadei asa, you can't return it to him. And be'emes l'chavetz chayim and avas chesed in Chelik Aleph Paragimel Sif Beis, there's a bigger chiddush. Of course, avas chesed is talking about the mitzvah of halvog mils chasadim, and he says to lend money to a fraya that will use the money for issa is lifnei iva. Now the truth is that's a bigger chiddush because the money that you're lending is not a cheftzat isura. He's going to use it for issa. Kolshkein returning a chayfetz that's asa, that's real lifnei iva. But the question is, so what do you do? So throw it out? Is it easy to say? But it's Yanam's mamanis. So Bayasha says try to sell it to a guy that's allowed to have it, if it's not a very desirous, and give the money to the bailam. Now that's very, tricky. I'm going to take a thing, I don't want to even hold on to it. I'm going to go start in the streets, sell it to a guy. When I tell Bacham in the camp, when they had this shaila, and we had the shaila, a very sticky shaila, Bacham that was sliding terribly. He had a phone that was terrible, and the boys found it. So I told him you can't return it. Throw it away, taka, but chip in, and I'll chip in also. I think it's a chashva mitzvah, and we'll give him back the value of the phone. If you tell him we threw out your phone because you shouldn't have it and give him musa, he'll be outraged. If you tell him we're giving you back the money, you show him that we're doing this with great avos Yisrael. We want to make you happy. We're going to pay the price, so you should be in good hands. And Taka Baruch Shem had a very good hashpah. It's very easy to be a kanoi v'yanim's cheshbon. People don't appreciate it. But you show that I'm willing to pay money to get you out of this mess, even though you don't realize it. So sometimes it's kedai, the extra few dollars, if you don't want to go sell it to a guy, which of course is very difficult. I'm not saying you have to. There's no chiyuv Shabbos Aveda, but that would certainly satisfy the Chayshim Mishpat issue in this. Someone knows of a collector that's going around who is illegitimate. Again, not a suffix. He's a vadei ganef. He's a phony. He's not an ani. He's not collecting from moisid. He's collecting from his own pocket. So the chayra giving him is lifnei iva. You're giving a ganef money to take shalai b'yaisha. Now, if indeed you are certain that lamaisa, that he's taka illegitimate, so you shouldn't give him, and tell others also, it's a geneva. Let's say you tell, but I don't want to make a fuss, I don't want to advise him, let me give him, I'll have in mind, I'm giving him a tana. So, tzedaka mishpat, perik beis, ha'ar nun zayin, that Yankel Bloy quotes, we heard from Shlomo Zalman, that's not going to help. Because the ani, quote ani, thinks that he's taking your money as tzedakah. He's nischavan lechoel basa chazir. Even though it's ala b'yadei basa tleh, so he's oiva on an issa. And by giving him, you're being oiva on the issa of lefneiva on that nischavan lechol basa chazir. So he says, the only thing is to say, listen, I know you're a phony, but I'll give it to you anyhow. But then you're not really saving his dignity. But this is an interesting point. The Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Mem Pei Aleph says, someone thinks he's doing an Aveira, but he doesn't know the fact that that's also a partial Aveira. So this is a situation you have to be careful. Taka, don't give him, say, I don't have, but not to help. Question, a person is speaking for irreligious people, he's trying to makarv them, telling them the wonderful Divrei Torah, and then he says, Baruch Hashem, they're all wearing yarmulkes, but how many people of them said B'rachas HaTorah? Probably if they didn't daven, they didn't say B'rachas HaTorah. Or some you have a guest, a Friday guest, who didn't daven that morning. You're talking Torah to someone who didn't say B'rachas HaTorah. So the emphasis is, besides the deraisa of B'rachas HaTorah, some say there's an Issa D'Rabbanan of learning without B'rachas HaTorah. So you're giving him to do that issa. The Dvar Avram Chelik Aleph Simon Tezayin quotes Abachana. There's an issa of learning without a bechas Torah. So the emes is it's taka when possible. Avadi try to tell him, let's say bechas Torah together. But if it doesn't work, I saw in a wonderful sefer Harimu Michshel. It's Amid Reish Lamed Vav. He makes the cheshbon that we made also, and he says, so if you don't learn with them, what are you going to have? Nothing. No bechas Torah, no limud Torah, no kiruv. If you learn with them, they'll have limud Torah, they'll have kiruv, and they won't have bechas Torah. But you're not making them not have bechas Torah. So at the end of the day, you're making it better, not worse. That's not lifnei eva. Oh. Then he has another cheshbon, and he says that the bechas Torah is the tafel to limud Torah. If you can't do the tafel, but don't do the ikka, makes no sense. Lamashal, he says, let's say you want to give someone a lulav to bench, but they don't like making brachas. They're fried, they don't make brachas, they'll shake it. So you're not going to give them to bench dalaminim because you won't make a bracha. So at least do the ikka. Now the truth, that's not really so convincing, because there the bracha and the mitzvah is separate. I mean, you're supposed to make a bracha on a mitzvah, but it's not ma'ak of the mitzvah. But here, if you hold there's an issa of learning without a bracha, b'chas Torah that is, then you're giving him a michshel. But then he quotes Rabbi Yasha, I'm afraid to say this, but a third teretz possibly, that if a friar person learns that he's not mechav l'shem limud, so it's not really limud Torah, and you don't need b'chas Torah. Okay, that's something hard to accept. But the truth is, what I think the real yesod of the heta is, you're doing it for his tayelas. You're taking the big picture, and if you don't teach him Torah, he'll have nothing. This way, at least have Torah, and hopefully we don't hold this mamish and issa to learn without bechas Torah. Hopefully it's just a mitzvah. So then you didn't really make more damage than, you did much more good than damage. If he's sitting there without a yarmulke, so Mr. Burataka and Simon Beis, Sif Katan Yud Beis says, it's also to learn without a yarmulke. So now we could say the same cheshbon and a chanami, but if you don't teach him Torah, so he has nothing. And without a yarmulke, he's sitting no matter what. So if you can't get him a yarmulke, at least we could have that yesod. Maybe you want to be a little more aggressive, you could say maybe he's only listening, so it's only hearer, and hearer without a yarmulke is mutter, but the truth is, if you're talking, so maybe it's more than hearer, maybe it's a shtickle of a chshivas of shemei kohen, even though he's not mechaver shemei kohen, but the point is, there is a cheshbon of taking the big picture, and you're really reducing his problems, not increasing them. Ma'isha, I told you earlier, someone was stopped on the street, a nebuch, a friar yid, needed directions, how to get to this destination on Shabbos. I guess he didn't have a GPS, but the embassy in Eretz Yisrael, the nebuch, everybody's Yiddish, so the postman is Jewish, and the police are Jewish, and the people that are lost are Jewish. They stop you, Habibi, they talk in perfect Hebrew, how do you get to so-and-so street? So the embassy is, the Muskel Rishon, it's a terrible chil Hashem, you help a Yid get to his destination by car on Shabbos. But then again, and that's Takawai, so the Tzitzali as a Chelik Tezvav, Simon Yud Ches says, tell him, I'm sorry, it's Shabbos, this is terrible, I can't help you. Rabbi Yashiv is quoted as saying, tell him the pasuk, Zachar is saying, Shabbos L'Katshei. With great tmimus, tell him that, then he'll get the hint. But the emes is, there are mekilim, and I think it's based on our Yisoid. Because if you don't help him, he'll try to go on his own and get lost, and have Mohel Shabbos. Or he'll stop the next person that he meets, also a Yid. So he's just driving and stopping and starting again. But the Chil Hashem is definitely there. So the approach would be, say, I would love to help you, you're my brother, you're a Yid, but I can't help you with Chilul Shabbos. But since I know, unfortunately, you're going to drive anyhow, and I want to minimize your Chilul Shabbos, so directions are so and so and so. This Reb Shlomo Zalman is quoted as saying, it's in the Shmir HaShabbos, he also saw it in the Mar HaShabbos, on B'Tov Tzadik Aleph. In other words, point out that it's painful that you're helping him, but you want to help him by giving him directions, because that's going to ultimately decrease Chilul Shabbos. And this is a beautiful point, Agav, I want to mention, because I saw this story years ago, and I checked it up again recently. Rav Yechiel Michal Stern, a Mechav of many svarim, in the Sefer Bayis U'Menuchat, Amid Reish Mem Vav, what he heard from his father, Rav Moshe Aaron Stern, the great Rav Moshe Aaron Stern, he said how he's once walking with Rav Eli Lapian. They were going to have Minchen Chevron Yeshiva Shabbos afternoon, and Rav Eli Lapian usually his yeshiva was not in the big city, and he wasn't accustomed to seeing Chilul Shabbos, people driving along the streets. And he told him, I can't go weiter. I'm walking and seeing drive with cars going back, but I have to turn back. So Moshe Aaron said, well, almost there, let's go. Okay, let's go quickly. Just then, a Chiloni driver pulled up. Slicha, ech magin l'rchov Yafa. He asked Rabbi Lapian. Rabbi Lapian burst out crying. I mean, he was paining from this. Now he has to give directions. But listen what he said. He said, I would love to help you. I have to help you. You're my brother. But how could I help you? I'm not helping you, but help you drive. But I have to help you. And the driver got out of his car. This is what he said. He said, listen, people scream at me day and night. My mother screams at me while I drive. My brothers, Yidden. No one cared about me like you did because you said you're my brother. Kavod Arav, if you tell me not to drive, I'm going to give you the keys right now. So he said, I see you have a hoichen neshama. That's what he told him. And I must tell you that the keys are muktzah. You have to drop it. And he dropped it. So Rabbi Yapan told Rabbi Sharon, you go down for mincha, I'm staying here. And he started talking to him. How's your mother? How's your job? And he said, before long, it became like a spectacle. The Bachim from Hebron came out to watch Rabbi Yapan talking to a Chiloni with a unparked car with keys on the floor and talking about Dvarim Shem Abakach. But he said, this made a roshim. Because, like the Chazon Ish says, when it comes to Kirv V'chaykim, Avoises Ahava is the greatest Mekar V'chaykim. Now again, it's when to apply this you have to know, but certainly in a case when you have to give direction, any sticky shaila, if you come across sincere, that makes the biggest roshim. I saw the Rav Zilberstein in Chashukei Chemen in Bechayris, Amid Lamed Zayin has a very interesting shaila, Kedarkoi. Someone's car alarm started ringing uncontrollably on Shabbos afternoon. And it's very loud, and the Chiloni neighbors are getting all nervous. Listen, give us the keys and we're going to close it, the alarm, because we can't bear it, or else we're going to call the police. They're going to open it and close it. So to give keys to Chilonim is Lifneiva. But he applies their kiveg that I mentioned, and he says, so if they're not going to give them the keys, they're going to call the police, and the police are going to call this, and they're going to have a whole chain of Chilul Shabbos. Cut your losses, and it's not Lifneiva. A really interesting shaila, but in Eretz Yisrael everything happens. The Gedolei Yisrael, because of rampant Chilul Shabbos, call for Havgana, a protest. So they asked Rabbi Yashiv, this is printed in the Koivus Chuvas and Aleph Mem Dalid, what kind of teichacha is that? You're giving teichacha about Chilul Shabbos, and when you make an Havgana on Shabbos, hundreds of police and press and spectators come to watch the show. You're increasing Chilul Shabbos. That's a teichacha for Chilul Shabbos. So again, it's printed in Rabbi Yashiv's Tshuva. He says it's not teichacha, it's saving Shabbos. If we just let this go, next week it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So it's not out teichacha because they're not going to listen, but it's to save the Heilig Shabbos. But then he adds a dava nifla, and he says, I lifneiva. So he says, kvar hoira maril diskin in kunjas achron simon kuf mem hey. I looked it up. Maril diskin is always very bekitza, but he says a dava pella. The Gemara says, the Mishnah says, in the beginning of Ksubis, Besul and Niseis, Liyayim Haravi, they made a takana to get married on Wednesday. The problem was that the Goyish Hegmoin was Mazana, they heard about Wednesday, so then they had to change the day of the Chasana. So for Maril diskin, what about the Lifneiva? And if they would have kept it, the only problem was that the girls were Ma'aseh Nefesh, and that was, of course, Ma'aseh Nefesh, the Yidden were losing their lives. But without the Mesiras Nefesh, they would have kept it Wednesday. Frag Maril diskin, a guy is Metzuva in Znus, if Neiva on the guy doing the Aveira. Zokta Maril diskin, from here we see, if you're doing a mitzvah, you're doing the Ratzon Hashem, you have nothing to do with the Hegman. The Hegman finds out and comes and does it in Aveira, that's not your business. If Neiva means you give someone a chefz of the michshel. A girl gets married on Wednesday, there's no chefz of michshel. It's the guy's Baal Taiva that gets him into trouble. That's not Lifneiva. So Rabbi Yashiv says, I'm making Afghana Kedasu Kedin. The fact that the press comes, that's Iu da Achshel Anafshei. Okay, we can't say Chabisol Dingen, but Rav Sternbuch in Chelik Aleph, Tov Sof Mem Beis, says the same Yisayid as well. The Afghanis we're doing a mitzvah, what comes out of it, that's their own michshel. A question, well, always bother me, but now I can't say I have much of a teretz, but I'll tell you what I found. The Gemara in Erechen, Daf Tezayin with Beis, wonders to what extent is there a chiyuv teichacha? You give someone a musa. Now, giving someone a musa is not always a very popular thing to do. And he starts to get angry. When are you allowed to stop? So one shita holds till he starts to hit you, adaka. One shita holds, no, don't wait till that, till he curses you. And the third shita is nezifa. Now, the emes is someone hits you, a yid hits you, it's a deraisa. Even a yid curse you, it's a deraisa. Even the zifa, if it's a very extreme sinner. So what's Pshat in the Gemara? The chiyuv teichacha, you're causing yid to do these Aveiros. So you're doing a mitzvah deraisa, very nice, of teichacha, but it's causing yid to do Aveiros. So the emes is the bi'alacha, and the end of Taf Reish Ches quotes the chinuch. That's where the Mechaber speaks about teichacha, where the chinuch says that the Gemara's ad is v'loy ad b'chlal. No, so according to that, I can understand. But many shittas hold even ad b'chlal. So the teretz the only thing I can think of is that this is not a din of teichacha, because if it's just teichacha and it's causing an aveira, so what kind of teichacha is it? This is an ongoing aveira, an ongoing chil Hashem. This lafrushim me'yisura. That has bigger chiyuvim. The Gemara said, "Makam sheyesh chil Hashem, ein chol can cover the rav. Afilu b'shuk, God look for that bris. That's nitcha for this." So probably this is more of a serious issa than the ongoing chet. That's why it justifies ad hakah, ad klola, ad nazif. If someone has a better teretz, I would love to hear it after the shir. Another case of where you see how sad sometimes the fneiva impacts our doing mitzvahs. The Gemara in Beya, and that's the Pasuk in the Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Yom Tov Tav Kuf Chavav, that if there's a levaya on Yom Tov Sheni, l'halach you're allowed to have a kfura on Yom Tov Sheni as kvayt hameis. Now, and the Shulchan Aruch describes how to do it. And this was always done. There was a kfura on Yom Tov Sheni, Goyim took care of the kfura. Now, in an ideal situation, the Goyim did the malacha, the Yidden did the levaya, and the mace had his kavod achrein, didn't have to wait till after Yom Tov. The problem is in America, there were two factors that impacted a concern. First of all, typically the base akvaris is out of state in New Jersey. A lot of driving is needed. And also, the fact is that many irreligious relatives, either they call about levaya, get calls, and come driving and go to the base akvaris. And it turns out often in not such high-mister circles like we live in, but it comes out that a levaya Sheni, there are many people coming and driving a massive chil Hashem, and that's certainly chil Yom Tov, and it's not a kavod hameis. But there's another factor, and that is today, where there's refrigeration, so there's no sircha, the concern of sircha and hameis doesn't apply. And that's why Rav Moshe in Archaim Chei Gimel Siman Ayin Vav and the B'Shleim Zalman in Yom Tov Sheni Kol Chasei in Perik Aleph HaOra Kuf Samach is the same thing. But Rav Moshe is much more ma'irich, and he says that really Rabbeinu Tam was worried that if it's going to come to Dei Malacha, then you shouldn't make Kfura on Yom Tov Sheni. But we don't pass in that way, because to leave a mace, it's going to deteriorate, is a terrible kvayt hameis. But Rav Moshe says today that so many krayvim end up calling and driving, and there's also the alternative to keep in a refrigerator, and there's no kvayt hameis. Rav Moshe says not to make a levaya in such a case and wait till after Yom Tov. Rav Moshe says even if it means waiting 3-day Yom Tov, you push off kvayt hameis because of the fneiva. Now again, I can't say all except for this. Kayidua, there are levayas Yom Tov Sheni, the Vina Rav Zechon Levarach, the levaya was the second day Rosh Hashanah. But just the feeling of it, the sensitivity, as Rav Moshe says, how could you call this kavod hameis that causes rampant chilul Yom Tov? I'll do it anyhow. That's not your business. By calling a levaya that brings out the worst in people. So this is something that has to be applied, of course, carefully. But the point is that somehow the fneiva affects a lot more than we realize. The very sensitive question, to put it lamaisa, is hitting a child, or actually the Rambam and Machab and Yardei Reishma Vav Yud Aleph has the same mitzvah of hitting a child, hitting a Talmud. I mean, today they might arrest me just talking about it. You're not allowed to hit children, but the truth is, midina Gemara, there's a mitzvah to hit a child and hit a Talmud. But then again, in the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch, hitting B'nai HaGadol is Lifnei Iva. But it's Lav Dafka B'nai HaGadol. The Poskim say this, even though the Ramah says 22 or 24 is the age that it's also to hit a child, but the same Mitzvah says, but if the child is, quote, a shtickle of Azaris, and he matures quickly, and at under my mitzvah age, that's the Ritva's Lashon, he hits back, same with Neiva. It's not Xeris HaKos of 22. It's when the child will respond and violate, keep it off. And all the Paiskim, Birka Yosef, Chayadam, Kitza, or Chashulchan quote this, that even under the mitzvah, if the child hits back, don't hit him. More so, all the Paiskim, they loved out the child hits back. If the child responds verbally, which is a violation of kibbutz, the Ritva says even if his matris kenegdoi, if he responds disrespectfully. If the response is a violation of kibbutz, then the father is being oiva on lefnei iva. Again, you mean well, he means Shem Shemayim, he's hitting the child, but the child is hitting back, either verbally or physically. So it's not working, and it's just a violation of neiva. And as a Nissen Kariel, it's in Chutshani, Kibbutz Aveim, Amit Shin Vav, he adds 2 points that our cause is lav dafka, because sometimes verbally hitting a child is more painful and more lasting and more devastating. And also he says, even with older children, the parents get involved with married children's lives, that's just a cause of neiva. They get angry, and they resent their parents, chas v'shalom, maybe it brings the ar makla of ve'imai. But the point is, this is a very sensitive situation that, of course, needs a share for itself. But the point is, the Shulchan Aruch devotes 2 seifim. In Seif Chaf, it talks about a child hitting back, but I think it's more striking. In Seif Yud Tes, Reish Mem Yud Tes, the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rambam, don't be overbearing, domineering, overimposing, demanding, because they're going to end up causing the children to get angry, and you're over on the fneiva. Now, this is not American talk. This is the Heilige Shulchan Aruch, based on the Heilige Rambam, and the way the Gaon says it's based on Kedushin Lamed Beis, and the basis is based on Moed Katan Daf Yud Zayin, about hitting a child. So again, when yes, when not, that you have to use seichel. But I just tell you what all agree. I saw this from the Stipler, and it's so poshut. Someone came to the Stipler, my son, mamash needs Musa. I tell him every day and he doesn't listen. Stipler says, I don't stand you. You're oivel of neiva every single day. You told him once and twice, you don't get the hint, he's not listening. Every day oivel of neiva. So you have to have seichel. You know, we have a heta, we have a mitzvah, we have a chiyuv to discipline children and hit children need be. But if it's not working, so it's just plain hitting and lifnei iva. So again, when yes, when not, madaf nutzen seichel. But I could tell you, the Sefer Chasidim has 2 shtiklach, Tavkuf Samach Hey, Tavkuf Samach Vav. The Rechaim HaKadosh was mechavan to this in Yotes Gimel, Vayikra. Ish imay va'aviv tira'u. Now this is not an American taich. I'm certainly not American in this respect. I also have children. Ish, if you have a boy that's an ish, either mature or thinks he is, aviv imay tira'u, you have to watch out with him. Because by hitting him and disciplining him, you're oivel of neiva. That's a Rishon and the Rechaim HaKadosh. Ish, imay va'aviv, or some, the other reading is, Ish, imay va'aviv tira'u lashon rabim, it's a joint effort. All 3 have to work together. The child has to behave, parents have to do things correctly. Now, I don't have that ideal at all of, just giving in and giving it in, but it has to work. If it doesn't work, so you're ending up with neiva and nothing of value. So it has to work. Now, of course, somebody asked me, a very young child, when I tell him something, he kicks me or bites me. That's kindish. That's not lefneiva. Young children never like what you say. That doesn't count. But when a child is doing something with a krima seichel, and he's already a bar chinuch, and he responds negatively, verbally, or chas shom worse, it's a time to reconsider what to do. A person needs a doctor, goes to a hospital, and the medical personnel, the doctor, the nurse, they're not religious, they're Jewish, not religious, and they're doing things that are not necessary. They're taking temperature 10 times. And, it's the chayil she'ein by sakana. You feel bad. Should I tell him something? So some people think, well, no, it's not my business. Adaita de nafshe. That's their own business. They're doing for their own. Chas v'shalom. By a goy that does molach adaita de nafshe, that's a heta. But by a yid, that's l'fnei iva. They're doing it for you. You have to stop them. But then again, you can't stop them. So this Rav Shlomo Zalman discusses in Shmir HaShabbos, Lamed Beis, Ha'ara Kuf Lamed, and he basically says that for that reason, it's best to have, believe it or not, if you need a doctor, there are two doctors, a Fruma and a Fraya, and both of them are the same quality, take the Jewish doctor, the Fruma doctor. He has another cheshbon, a very lomdish cheshbon, that the Fraya doctor doing it for the money, maybe he doesn't have the heta of Pekuach Nefesh, he's not doing Hashem Shemayim. The Fruma doctor is doing it for the mitzvah, so he has a mitzvah without any shayla. And also he won't do extra. But Lamaisa, in these cases, I think you have to use little darchei noyam. You can tell them nicely, listen, I appreciate you so devoted to me, but I'd rather you don't do it. Our Pam once told me he had a mailman that brought the mail to his house, a year that was fry. And every Shabbos he brought the mail to his house, malacha. So he said, I told him nicely, I would appreciate if you don't bring my mail on Shabbos. Even though it involved a lot of extra work on the mailman's part, you had to put it someplace else to remember. But he said, I told him nicely, and he never came again on Shabbos. So Amol Medarchei Noyam, you could accomplish. A challenging question, and that's an understatement, is a Mohel is called to do a Mila, a Shabbos Mila, and he realizes this is going to be rampant Chilul Shabbos. There are going to be pictures, there's going to be driving to and from the Mila. So Agav, a Mohel has to find out, by the way, because sometimes it's not even a Shabbos Mila. The baby was born Saturday, 6 p.m., this coming Shabbos. So they think it's Saturday, but it's not, of course. If it's a Yotze Doifin, if it's not a natural Mila, it's also not Doicha Shabbos. But we're talking about when it was really a Shabbos Mila. So the question is, the Mohel realizes that if he's going to make the Mila, it's going to be Chilul Shabbos. So what's the option? Pushing it off to Sunday. Mila Bismana is very, very important. So he'll say, I can't do it. So they're going to get Dr. So-and-so, who's not religious, and maybe it's not even a Chalois Mila. But Rav Osna, in a few tshuvas, insists, and this is Chelik Aleph, Reish Hey, and again Chelik Dalet, Kuf Lamed Dalet, that if you know it's going to be a Chilul Shabbos, not just an uncle comes and a picture here, but it's going to be an official Chilul Shabbos, don't do the Mila. It's Chilul Shabbos, and the center of attraction is this from a Mohel. Because without the Mila, there's no party, there's nothing. And in Chelik Dalet, Kuf Lamed Hey, he brings up the Musraya, but listen to his Einfal. We mentioned Beinu Tam earlier that held that to push off the Kfur on Yom Tov Sheni because it brings Chilul Yom Tov. Even though there's a mitzvah to bury as soon as possible, but if it brings Chilul Yom Tov, you can't do it. So he says, Kol Shkein, that Mila Bizmana Hagamitz and Bechoshev, but it's going to cause Chilul Shabbos by Yidden. He says, better push it off. And it's not your business what happens. Now, in Chelik Tes Reish Yud, some people misused this heta, and whenever they had a Shabbos bris, they didn't want to go on Shabbos, they pushed it off till Sunday. And they blamed on him because you get maybe Chilul Shabbos. He said, no, that's just misusing my heta. That's just because for your benefit. I mean, if it's going to be a Chilul Shabbos bris, you can't go. Now, Lamaisa Rav Moshe Yeredei Chelik Aleph Kuf Nun Vav, the Minchas Yitzchak Gimel Lamed Hey, Tzitz Eliezer Chelik Vav, Simon Gimel, all seem to be makel that you can't push off a Mila. What's going to be Chilul Shabbos? They don't really discuss. Rav Moshe does discuss it certainly, but it seems that Lamaisa, if there's no other choice, and they'll get a Mohel that's not going to do it Kedas Ukudin, that's worse. So you're basically minimizing the losses. What I think very practical, you could do the Mila and tell the family, listen, for the benefit of the child, let's try to keep it a good start. Make the party Saturday night. Very good. I'll be happy with that. Why not? This way, people could come and try to avoid that the Chilul Shabbos, the Mila itself is the mitzvah without the, usually the Suda is what causes the big problem. Another question of the Fneiva, Ma'isa Shahaya, there was a lot of Genevas going on in a certain place. I don't want to say where. And they were chayish at a certain person. So they wanted to set up a trap. They'll put someone's wallet where this person goes, and of course today everything's with surveillance cameras, and they'll watch if he takes the money. So it's a great way of catching a ganif, but that's mamish lifnei iva. And the emes is, this is a Gemara. Kedusha Lamed Vei, the famous story, Rabbi Bar Huna wanted to test his son to see if he'll get angry. So he got him a little nervous. Frag the Gemara, but if he gets angry, lifnei iva. Zok the Gemara, he was Mohel on his kavod. Zok the Torah Lishma and Simon Tez Saf Zayin. He has this shaila, not with the surveillance camera, but there was a ganif. They wanted to put money in his office and see if he takes it. He says, that's lifnei iva. And the emes is, this is mamish a Gemara, or two Gemaras. Even if he didn't yet take it, you're putting down a ma'isa michshel. This is like giving money without aidis, or like hitting a child. In other words, this is a case, a real nesinas michshel. And Rabbi Stein Bezalman and Cheshleimet Tinyana Saif Simon Kuf Lamed Gimel has the same shaila, and he also says that's lifnei iva to put down a trap. He says, but don't fire him. That's also wrong. You have to do things al pi chayshim mishpat. Find out who's a ganif, but you can't fire him. You'll say, you'll be Mohel on the money. So even if he steals it, it's not geneva. He says, yeah, but there's still a problem of nischavan lechol basa chazir, like we said earlier. So this is why lamaisa, this is an issue that it's a fneiva. Now I did see a fascinating tshuva in the Sefer Mishpatei Torah. It's Chelik Aleph, Siman Ayin Ches, and his mahalach is that if you're doing it to save money and there's an ongoing geneva, that might be a fushim me'isura and you're allowed to do it. The case in the Gemara was he wanted to test his son to see where he's holding in Ruchnius. Okay, so don't do that. But if you want to save your money, I would give a mashal, l'sabes ha'oizen. Maybe you can't put alarms in Eretz Yisrael or security cameras because you'll catch the ganef who's a yid. Or on Shabbos you have to put a sign, only Goyim could steal here, because if you steal here, you're going to sound the alarm. Lifnei iva on alarm. In other words, there's a certain point of either achshla nafshi. But lamaisa, I think it's clear that if a person's doing it just, he wants to see where they're holding, don't do it. That's a sinas michshel. If you're doing it to save ongoing genevis, and you're trying to chap a ganef, hopefully you'll straighten him out. We have a het at least, some say, based on that makar. Last but not least, which really maybe one day will be a share for itself, but I want to mention at least the point to look into. The question I've heard many times, you give someone kavod, a lot of kavod. Why isn't that lifnei iva? Tayyivas Hashem kol gvalev. You give someone a very delicious meal, but you're giving him taivas. So I heard B'Shem Rabbi Salam, this quote attack in the Agdama T'Koyach Veyar, and Chatzkel quotes it, that in Midas there's no lifnei iva. And that sounds like cross the board heta, which can be. Iba yisei mikra, iba yisei misvara. Iba yisei mikra, it's a Gemara Kedushin. The Gemara Kedushin says to test if someone's going to get angry, right? It was asa. The only heta was that he was Mohel. And the Chidah in Birkei Yosef, go look it up. In Reish Mem Yud Gimel, he says, but what about, okay, so he's Mohel on his kavod, but what about the lifnei iva on Makkah on the Issa of Kas? So he said he knew he wouldn't get Bekas. But if you make someone Bekas, that's lifnei iva. Iba yisei masvara is bin adam chaveri any less than bin adam lamakim? We learned the Gemara in Yuma. The first churban bayis was bin adam lamakim in the worst chamuris, 70 years. Bin adam l'chaveri is almost 2,000 years. A dmus raya, I'm not saying it's a raya brura, but the Mishnah in Aveiros Perek Daled, Mishnah Chav Beis, al teratzes chavercha b'shas kasoi. Why? Because he might get angry at you. Pashtus. That might be al lifnei iva, unless you want to say maybe it won't help. A dmus raya, again, dmus raya, erev and yud chesed at beis, you're only supposed to give someone miksa shvachai b'fanav. Why not lay it on thick? Maybe that's lifnei iva. Now, what's quoted b'shem Yisrael Salanta? So be'emes it's very pashut. Ma'ar machadav olay pligi. In the Sivas Ar, Nun Tes Amid Beis, Amid Beis, they say Rabbi Yisrael Salanta's golden midas. By him, kavod was blotter. He was berech min kavod to the nth degree. But to give yenim kavod, he knew every nuance of giving kavod. The godless was what for him was nothing, but he's mechabit someone else. And that's what his Talmud Rabbi Itzel said. Aswanta meant, you have to now, don't worry about Yenem's ruchnius. You give him kavod. The Baruch Shem help him, he'll be okay. You know, I can't give someone good food because Lamaisa is going to kal taiva. No. Yenem's ruchnius is your gashmius. So like someone said, a candy for you is taiva. A candy to give Yenem is a mitzvah of chesed. They say that once during that kafis, they were picking up a Itzel Petersburg and they were dancing Sushar Mashechem or Izwa Tzadik. And someone asked, what about the Issa of kavod? You're making Bal Gaiva. So they said, just listen what he's saying to himself. And he was saying over and over, Sivchu Esan Avela, Sivchu Esan Avela. I said, I heard this from the Eid Riyah. He walked up the Manchester Yeshiva into Lakewood Yeshiva to give a shmooze, and hundreds of Bachim stood up, Younger Light stood up, and Reb Seg was saying so over and over, Toivas Hashem kol gvar lev, Toivas Hashem kol gvar lev. That's what Yisrael Salanta meant. You have a mitzvah to give Yanim kavod. It's a kavod, a mechor mechaber sabriyos, and v'after recha kamoicha, hamachas chavercha benachas. You do what you have to do. The person that's getting the kavod deserves kavod. He won't be a bal gaiva. Don't worry about him. But if to start thinking, I'm afraid, maybe, it's a suffix, you're not giving a michshel. If someone you know will do an aveira mamish, you can't ask someone that you know he's going to lie. So to say if him, that's the fneiva. You're causing him to lie. There's no blanket het to be an adam chaveira is mufka chas v'shalom. But when something you have to do tracht von yenem, your yenem's gashmius is your ruchnius. Give him what he needs, and you could rely that he will do the right thing, and there won't be any Aveiros. I go to talk to you all.
Smith is like a schmack share. Shame I would like to thank Rabbi Smith for the wonderful share. Rabbi, I would like to remind everyone that this Wednesday there's going to be a asifa here in the afternoon share 1:30 on the inyan of Shidduchim. A tremendous guest speaker from Israel, Rabbi Shmerler, the Tzanzarov, is coming to speak. He spoke of Williamsburg, over 1,000 people, and visions in Monsey, also huge oilam. And we hope Met Hashem this Wednesday be a Kiddush Hashem to Mechazik Dinyan of helping Shidduchim and Klal Yisrael. And we gaan Hashem Meretz Gushbach Azakis Yisrael, Fikir Hebelem Teure Mitzvos, Shenem Adonai Chofetz Man Sitka Yagdil Teure V'Yadeh Kaddish.